Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sparing Partners. Today, we're going to tackle a very important, even though somewhat weedy kind of issue, which is standardization in an age of geopolitical turmoil. And so we are all happy that finally we're able to use our cell phone everywhere, whichever country we go. And if you remember a while ago, you'd go, I mean, I remember you arrive in Japan, the phone doesn't work anymore, and you need to get a different handset. We don't have that problem anymore. We are very happy about it. Is this going to continue? Yeah, probably yes, but part of it is because devices can support different standards, but how much should we care about having a single standard? On the other hand, there is a validity of having multiple standards. So, for instance, you have cellular and Wi-Fi that are completely different standards, and there is a huge value to the fact that you have multiple standards. However, those standards are available worldwide. So your phone would do two things, I mean, well, many things, but you basically have both cellular and Wi-Fi, but both of them work everywhere. So you have the advantage of diversity and the advantage of global availability. And so the question is that, is this at risk? Is it going to change? And I have Sebastian Barros today talking to me. He's the managing director of Circles. And I got across Sebastian in a somewhat odd way through all this posting at LinkedIn, he's incredibly prolific. I wish I could be like that, but I'm just don't have it in me. And his postings are incredibly insightful. And so I thought that would be a great person to talk to, even though we haven't met in person as most of the other guests have. So, but I think it's going to be really interesting because his take on all these issues is very, very interesting and insightful, as I said. So, Sebastian, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we get going on this.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Monica, for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about something that we are all feeling, but rarely name out loud. It's always a little bit taboo topic to talk about geopolitics and the implication for telco. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to talk about. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've been almost 23 years in the industry. Um, I've been in many different roles, from technical roles, from commercial roles, from managing roles. I've been working with in telco operators. I started my career with Liberty here in Latin America. Then I joined Ericsson, where I spent around 14 years in different parts of the world, Europe, Asia, and back to Latin. I also spent time with Google Cloud. At that time, they were just building their telco practice, so it was super exciting to be with them. And now I'm in a new role with the Circles, which is a company building digital branding experiences. Very interesting, very innovative, and we are working with many customers around the world. One of the customers happened to be here in Mexico, so I'm taking the role for Latin America, and of course to grow the business. And on top of that, as you said, I'm a very prolific author of books. I'm well working on my doctorate on AI. I hope to finish, but on top of that, I have some few books about artificial intelligence, and also I do a lot of publications on technical research papers and also on LinkedIn, as you mentioned. So really, really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, and I am too, because and today's topic, I think it's something that it's kind of hard because it's not just standards, it's all sorts of things. So, okay, why don't you just give us a little bit of a sort of overview of what do you think is happening with standards? 3GPP has been around forever. Um, why should we worry about it? We have 6G coming,
So
apparently.
yeah, hopefully telcos can make money out of it. Otherwise, I think we will still hear
That's a
complaints.
topic for another podcast.
Yes, correct. Well, I think there's some reasons to be concern, right? So the global telecom system, this incredible machine that connects 8.6 billion devices seamlessly across 190 countries, is under threat. And this time the threat is not technical, it's more political. What we see is we are watching a globalization uh, breakdown, or someone could even say that globalization is dying in real time. I mean, tariffs are rising, defense budgets are exploding. Actually, they are the highest ever. Wars are withdrawing alliances. Nationalism, political nationalism, is coming back from the left and from the right, and is shaping tech policies. And suddenly, telcos are caught in this crossfire of geopolitics, right? I identify around 11 major trends driving these fragmentations, all the way from chips war around the 7 nanometer lithography. Now that China cannot buy those 7 nanometers chips, they are building their own. The rise of a tech cold war, diverging on 5G standards. I mean, we saw a little bit of a glimpse of 5G when they broke non-SA with SA, but I think this is just the beginning. Clean tech initiatives driven by the US, and the silent shift from global trust to local control, right? And this could be another day in this crazy world. The problem is that telcos didn't build this system alone. Uh, our system is based on the standards, and we might be the first one to suffer if it breaks, right? So, of course, there is a challenge that we're going to talk about, but also I believe there is an opening. If we act now across operators, vendors, regulators, we can protect what makes this industry unique, which is the global reach, the massive scales, and of course, the system level interoperability. But if we don't, we're heading towards a future where networks will be nationalized, innovation will slow down, and probably the worst for consumers, right? Like me, cost will explode.
Yeah, yeah. So it looks like, on the face of it, sort of that the naive person would say, well, why would anything change? We put a lot of effort. We finally got to a point where we do have global standards. They were not perfect, but they work reasonably well. So who stands to benefit from breaking this down?
Good point. So we need to think about the way telcos operate today in R&D, right? So R&D in telcos is centralized. Telcos spend less than 1% of their revenues in R&D. If you compare to any tech company, they are in the range of 20-25%. So how they do it, they transform that R&D into CapEx. Telco wireless, for instance, wireless operators invest every year religiously 300 billion US dollars, and that money is transferred to companies like Ericsson, Nokia, Qualcomm, Intel, Huawei. Around 10 companies, there are not so many. Those companies take that CapEx budget and transform it into R&D. And now this R&D is dictated by very few consortiums, right? You have GSMA, ITU, and what happened here is that those consortiums, like the 3GPP specs, are built by 1,200 members, right? Organizations that, of course, enforce ITU and GSMA. That's great because essentially what you get is economies of scale. Telcos don't need to worry about R&D. R&D is in one single bucket, is standardized, and it works well. What happened now is that from a political point of view, I don't think anyone in the industry has a problem with that. Even I come from Ericsson. I think Ericsson is a big advocate of standards, right? The same with Huawei. I would not put any telco or vendor against this, but I think we are caught in a political war where you have the West trying to impose certain technologies and the East trying to impose certain technologies, mainly because of geopolitical concerns, right? So the only ones who will get benefit from this, I think, is in my view, politicians, right? Uh, and the main arguments today is, of course, concerns about security, right? The mistrust between the West on China especially when it comes to all this mobile traffic going through Chinese networks. More than 60% of the traffic is in the world going through Chinese networks. And from China is, of course, they want to have control over technologies layers, right? So in a way, telcos are caught in the middle of this big geopolitical war that in my view has nothing to do with technology, but more to do with who dominates the world, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, and um, obviously security is important. Nobody denies that, no matter where you are. However, I'm not sure that having standards, less standards, would actually improve security. In fact, it would have a negative impact because security, there's always a security risk. Security is not something it's not something you can
Correct.
solve. It's something you can manage. And so you want to have uh, networks that are more open, and standards create the sort of baseline to enable openness. Because if everything it's a proprietary thing, then it's sort of almost by definition more closed. So you need to have openness. So security is served by openness more than by proprietary solutions.
I tend to agree.
Or am
I
I
tend to
missing
agree.
something here?
No, 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 no. I fully agree with you. And let me tell you something. I think if I were in a position to be concerned about security, and I think it's nothing new that this clean tech movement started from the US and then followed by the other countries like the UK, all the US allies, right? UK, Australia, uh, was pushing a security agenda, security concerns over Chinese technology. Uh, but in my view, I share with you that first of all, standards, if everyone follows the same standards, you have more control on the security compared to building your own black boxes. I mean, black boxes, you don't have zero control, regardless if this comes from the US, from Sweden, or from China. So standardization gives you a better view, 3BB standards, on how things are built from the inside. And the second thing I tend to disagree on this approach is that if you want to control security, you cannot do it from a government point of view. You need to have an external auditor who controls if the Chinese vendors are following those standards, the Swedish vendors are following those standards, the American vendors are following those standards. And this is not new. I mean, in the airline industry, you have external audit companies. I think it's called ICAO that actually run independently reports on security, on vendors, and also on airlines. So you need to have an unbiased party to run that. Otherwise, it will be accusations that are more driven by political interest than by technology, right?
Yeah. Which is, I guess, the problem is that it doesn't matter where you go in terms of political. I mean, politicians don't usually understand technology all that well, and if you just read a few documents, you kind of understand it. And so they impose their own messaging, whatever that is, which is not necessarily leading to the most efficient or the best technical solution. And so it's kind of separation of church and state here, I think. It's like you want to keep them separate. And I think that we got to a point recently where the two started to get too close, I mean, to intersect too much. And I think that this
Correct.
is regardless of what the politician in or the country thinks. It's just like we should keep it separate as much as we
Correct.
can.
No, and I think it's related to this nationalism we see now in politics, right? Even left or right. You now see most politicians talking about a national agenda more than a global agenda.
Yeah.
And that's why immigration now is becoming a huge issue in many of the European countries, even in Latin America. In my own country, Chile, this is a big issue that is used by the left and right. Uh, and all of a sudden, the national agenda start getting into technology. And I think the logic behind, if I try to understand, right, is it's like, okay, now that mobile networks are not only for watching YouTube videos, but are for critical infrastructure like a nuclear plant, do I want that network to be from a Chinese vendor, or I want this network to be owned by a ally kind of, or at least neutral network? That's kind of the
Yeah.
logic behind this political discussion, right? In my perspective, if I, and I'm taking a technical view, I am okay the origin of that network as long as there was some external outlet that the network
Yes.
is secure and there are no issues in terms of security or cybersecurity, right? But then that needs to be dictated by an external party that is unbiased. Otherwise, China can say the same about US technology, right? This will be a never ending story.
But we don't have that kind of structure. And instead, we have individual governments trying to legislate or trying to determine how to do it. And it just seems like the assumption is that it's the hardware is the problem or the vendor. But when you look at historically, what happens is that when you have a security problem, it's just, or something bad happens, it's just somebody, it's some sort of individuals or something that are not the vendors responsible for it. And it could be a different country trying to do something, but it's not the vendor is usually not the people that get caught. Or it could be an individual even in that country. So within the network. So that's kind of it's not necessarily as far as we have in terms of evidence from the past, it's not the hardware so much that creates the problem.
No,
Is
no,
that
no.
who is
Usually,
able to access things in the networks.
yeah. I mean, this cybersecurity is an interesting topic, but in my perspective, yes. Usually, is the way that networks get penetrated is usually because of a human error.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yes.
very sophisticated. Usually, it's a very simple password. Many of the people, the engineers, network engineers, were sharing one single password, or sometimes it's because you're using legacy software that doesn't
Mhm.
have the latest patches, and then someone can manage to get there and do a ransomware attack. And cyber attackers, hacker organizations now are global organizations, are extremely well prepared. They have massive budgets, and they're anarchists, right? They're not
Mhm.
usually aligned to a single government. You have Russians, you have Americans, you have Chinese. They're well known. And one of the benefits we have when we use global standards is actually that we share this information. So even at vendor level, if there's an attack in a network in Malaysia, we will know about that and we will inform other networks in the case we need a patch or we need to take care of something. So globalization in that sense actually is, it allows us to share a lot of these attacks that networks are suffering every day.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing that we need to think about. So standards seem to be just a kind of the plumbing that you need in order to address security concerns and cost, and because obviously, if everything is standard based, it's going to be cheaper. Well, I'm not saying obviously, but there's some history to that. If we have all different things you have to accommodate. So it just seems like why would we destroy it? I mean, it's actually when you think about telecoms has been an incredibly success story in terms of ensuring global standards in other sectors it's not. So we actually have a good track record. So to throw it away just seems like, but as you
Yeah,
say,
yeah,
it's
I don't see
there
much
is
value.
a threat to it coming from geopolitical things. But standards is one thing, but the other aspect is openness. And so you see, like, US that is promoting Open RAN as a sort of political, also from a political thing as a US technology and whatever, but really, true openness is going to protect us from all sorts of issues and beneficial to everybody. And I'm
It's,
not
I mean,
talking about Open RAN specific. I'm talking about openness, which is much bigger than Open RAN.
yeah, I mean, such a fascinating topic, right? So uh, standards are not the same as openness, right? So standards give you a guideline that you follow, so everyone is in the same page, let's say, right? Now, standards can be interpreted in many ways. So every vendor will have a flavor of that standard applied to their hardware and software. Furthermore, right, some areas within that standard will still be closed. And a good example is, for instance, uh, basebands and radios, right? I mean, that standard between the radio and the radio, the baseband and the radios go, and I don't know if it makes a lot of sense, but that's another discussion. But if you want to buy a baseband from Ericsson and just go and plug and play with a baseband from Huawei, that's not going to work today. So in a way, Open RAN started with that logic. I think in the 2016, 15,
Mm-hmm.
they started with that logic, and I think that was the genuine intent, right? Say, look, why don't we try to build a more open network? We unlock some of the the points and some of the interfaces that are still locked, and this could drive more competition, more investments, and maybe even cheaper networks. That was like the
Mm-hmm.
mantra. The problem, I think, is that Open RAN at some point became more of a political agenda, right? Say, okay, let's try to find a new constellation of vendors, not the traditional ones, that can build RAN, uh, piggyback, piggybacking on this idea that now networks will be open. And then we saw the Mariners of this world and many others trying to get a business out of this Open RAN. But in a way, Open RAN was logic, but also was driven by a political agenda, not a technical or a new value proposition. So I think to some extent it's falling short to really promote that, right? And we haven't seen a big uptake, at least in my perspective. So I think they need to, I mean, if you want to be open, you need to be open with anyone, not with the ones you want, right? And if you want to build standards, I think standards by default should try to be as open as possible. Otherwise, somehow you are trying to lock in telcos.
Yeah. Well, it's just like CPRI. Well, actually, no, CPRI is not even an open standard. It's a standard, but it's not an open standard. But then you have
Yeah,
problems. And then, but I guess, back to your point, with Open RAN being a political thing is, it didn't, I mean, not only is not being deployed as much as it could have, but it looks like even if it were, you wouldn't really change dramatically the distribution of vendors. So, maybe Ericsson, Nokia, and Huawei would lose a little bit, but not a significant amount of market share. So you're gonna have Open RAN, but then still same players. Because that's driven, I mean, openness is just one ingredient. You need scale in telecoms.
yeah, yeah. It's the scale. The
You cannot
problem with
just
this
have too
industry,
many players in the RAN.
exactly. This is something that most of the people get really pissed off. They always say, "Hey, this is like a duopoly or a monopoly of a few companies like Ericsson, Nokia, and Huawei." But the reality is that, first of all, is not like selling cloud. I mean, if you just go and see the financial reports from Ericsson and Nokia, and I think their net profits are in the single digit range, probably below cost of capital. So it's not like they are having monopolistic profits. And the second thing you need to realize is that for Huawei, Nokia, and Ericsson to be successful, they need massive volume
Yes.
because the way that you're selling very cheap hardware and software. You're also selling services, which usually goes with a negative margin. Um, so if you want to be a Mavenir coming into this uh, competitive landscape unless you get a big contract of some few 100,000 base stations or sites. It's going to be really hard for you to fund your R&D. So that's why you always get these 3-4 vendors that can survive, because it's a scale type of technology.
Yeah, that's the thing is that there's just not a, it's kind of a nature, the nature of the beast kind of thing. It doesn't really matter, how open the standards are at some point. In the same way that you cannot have too many operators within a country operating a
Correct.
network. You can have a lot of MVNOs, you can have any number of them, but I think that like 3, 4 networks, it's the max. More than that, I
Correct.
mean, if there's any country or any big country or any country that I know at least that has, like say 10 operators operating a network. I mean, a nationwide network. So, and that's the same thing. It's a scale issue. There are some things where you can only do at scale. You
Correct.
can share the infrastructure, but you cannot operate an independent infrastructure. And same with the vendors.
Correct. So you need to have at least the baseline of the infra to run a scale, and for that you will need only few vendors because they can generate the economies of scales. Then you need to have very low cost of production, right? If you could say so.
Yeah.
What I think is missing in the industry is that we need to maybe open and have a more liberal view of what is happening on top of it, right? So I don't have an issue if you have 3 vendors controlling the radio and the core.
Yeah.
Probably that's the way it should be. So you can run cheap and efficient networks. What I think we are lacking in the industry is to have that top layer where you have a very diverse number of vendors that bring new applications, new ideas, new solutions that telco can sell on top of their network platform, right? That part is not in the industry today, right? And I think that's where we are lacking, and that's the monetization issue we face.
Yeah. Well, and also I would say that one thing that I'm increasingly concerned with is what happens at the other end of the chipset level, because you do want to have diversity. I mean, so you don't want to have many players, but you don't want to have too few players either. So, so are we at risk that at the chipset level we start having not enough competition?
Yeah, that's probably that's the biggest cold
Right.
war that we're facing today. If you think
Yeah.
about it, the industry now, if you look at the gold standard, right, is the size of your nano chip, right? And nano chips now are, well, the commercial standard is 7 nanometers.
Mhm.
That's crazy. I mean, that's 7 nanometers means that you can pack like 100 billion transistors in 1 nanometer square. It's crazy. I mean, imagine what I'm
It's
saying,
amazing.
right?
Yeah.
100 billion. It's crazy. Now, producing those 7 nanometer chips is very complex because you need EUV lithography, you need machines that cost 300 million each, and you need to set these factories. It takes you like 10 years, right?
Mhm.
Today in the world, there are only 3 foundries that can build these 7 nanometers chips. TSMC, which is the Taiwanese one, Samsung, Korean, and Intel. Uh, Besides that, nobody else have this technology. And we know that Intel is struggling today. So I will be concerned, and I will not be surprised if someone else buy them. But these are the 3 companies that can provide this to the world. And that means smartphones, 5G base stations, you name it, right? Now, China used to buy from Taiwan these chipsets, for instance, from Samsung, sorry, for Huawei
Yeah.
phones, but they got banned. So now China can only do 14 nanometers. And a few months ago, Huawei all of a sudden say, no, no, I found a way to do 7 nanometer chips, so I can put more transistors in chipsets. They are not as good as the TSMC, Samsung, and Intel, but they work.
Yeah.
Uh, Moreover, 90% of the global production of advanced chips is with Taiwan, with TSMC. So and we know the tensions between China and Taiwan. So this is super. It's a massive issue because without the chips is the heart and is the brain of any machine you use today, especially networks, right?
Yeah.
And this is my point. I don't think that banning China will do anything. I mean, China has already proved that as soon as you put a sanction, they will double down on that technology. Uh, so I
Which
don't think,
makes sense because, I mean, if
yeah,
it happens to you, I mean, to any of us, I mean, the sort of the equivalent, if somebody tries to say you cannot get this to do it, I'm gonna try to do it myself. I mean,
exactly.
this is not China. I mean, everybody would do it, and it had the side effect of actually encouraging more competition down the line. So they're facing a short-term uh, mm, challenge, but in the long term, that might put them in a better position to compete. So we are going to be in a worse position because they won't be able to make all the chips that they need, and we cannot because we will still be relying on companies in other countries because the manufacturing still going to be in the U.S. I mean, in the U.S.
Exactly.
trying to change it, but the likelihood of that happening is not necessarily too high.
And this chip war is reshaping the global value chain. So just to give you an idea, so US say, well, uh, if China is going to start challenging me on this, I'm going to double down. So they came with a US Chips Act, which
Yeah.
it's a 52 billion US dollar subsidies to tie to friendly production, so countries that are friendly.
Yeah.
Then China say, well, I will put
Yes.
150 billion big fund for domestic fabrics. Uh, and
And they
then
have a lower cost base. So,
exactly, and they have the
so
government who can dictate whatever you do. So
yeah. So it's really like I guess that in the from the point of view of diversification, that's actually a good thing because we have more sources, we have more diversity. But from the sort of U.S. or Western world side, we're just gonna be worse off because we're gonna have even less control.
correct. So you become divided, right, in a way. And I think this clean tech um, value proposition that US was promoting, I think will not stop only at telco level, but now will go to the chip level, will go probably to the AI uh, um, foundation models. So in a way, you will have East and West fighting for technology, which I don't think really helps anyone, if I'm very honest.
Well, yeah, because it's not competition. It's more fight. I mean, creating alternative models that do not coexist. So diversity is good if it's innovation where people compete on a even field. But what we are seeing, I think, is just having different countries going on a different direction and not competing but fighting each other, if that
Correct.
makes a difference. So yeah, yeah. So anyway, Sebastian, I have to let you go, but this was a extremely interesting conversation, and maybe next time we'll talk about some other topic because you cover so many interesting things that I really think we should continue the discussion.
Yes, more than happy. And I think, yes, as you mentioned, I mean, we started with just the geopolitical concerns on the standardization, but as you notice, and I notice also, everything is interlinked. So happy to be
Yeah.
here again, and thank you for having me. It was a really interesting session.
Excellent, Sebastian, and thank you all for listening in. And do continue to listen to Sparing Partners and subscribe to the feed and let other people know about it. Thank you very much. Bye bye.